Excellent. Okay, good. How's everyone going, by the way? Is it Friday? It's Friday today, is it? You made it through another week. Congratulations. No small feat. Right? Excellent. And can I just ask, is there anybody here who has never meditated, completely new to meditation? Anyone completely new to meditation? So, okay. So you all know how to meditate. Is that right? No.
Really good.
No? Yes? Some? Of course you do. Meditation's very easy. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to persuade you of a few things that you probably are not going to believe. So first of all, which one is easier? Oh, actually, this is really good because you've got a biology teacher here, okay? Which one is easier, holding on or letting go? Which one is easier, holding on or letting go? Who thinks that holding on is easier? Okay, who thinks that letting go is easier? Oh, I think letting go wins. Oh, that's interesting. It's curious. Because we asked this question a few different times, and usually people are strongly on the favour that holding on is easy. And anyway, so that's good. Obviously, the monks here and Venerable Chandra have been doing their job, teaching about letting go. So when we hold on to something, looking for something to hold on to, this will do. So when we hold on to something, we can grip that thing very tightly. And we can hold it very hard. In fact, if you think about it, it's quite remarkable because you've just got like these little muscles in your hand and you can actually hold your whole body weight with those muscles. I mean, they're pretty amazing, right? So you can hold very, very hard with those muscles. But your hand also has like muscles on the back as well. And these are the letting go muscles, right? When you want to be able to let go of something. Which ones are stronger, the ones for holding on or the ones for letting go? Yeah, letting go ones are really small. Well, the holding on muscles are very strong. Why? Because holding on is hard. You see? That's biological proof that holding on is hard and letting go is easy. Am I wrong?
Depends on the muscles.
Hands on the muscles. Come on. I was trying to give like a simple lesson. Don't interfere with my simplistic lesson by bringing in complexities of the real world. Okay, fine. But anyway, in my mind, I've now proven that letting go is easy and holding on is hard. Okay, I don't know about in your mind. So when we meditate is a practice of letting go. Yeah. How are we going there?
It's all right. No worry.
Is it all right?
We just want to make sure about the sound quality.
Yeah, no, sure. Just want to check it's okay.
Keep going.
Keep going?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Eko, due, tayo. No, we're good? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So if holding on is hard, okay, and letting go is easy, meditation is about letting go. Right? Right? Therefore, meditation must be easy. Right? It's just logic. Not really.
Monkey mind.
Monkey mind?
Like, keep thinking.
What do monkeys do?
Running around. This is
Monkeys grab on and let go, right? But we've already established that letting go is easy. Right?
agree.
Agree. Okay, excellent. That's good. So we've now logically established beyond reasonable doubt that meditation is easy. Okay? Why is it that we think meditation is hard? Well, let's check that. Is that true? Who thinks meditation is hard? Okay. Okay, who thinks it's easy? Who's just saying that they think it's easy because they think that that's what I want you to say? All right. So meditate. What if I was to tell you that meditation's easy? Let me. Okay, so what do you have to do to hold on? Okay, so what do we have to hold on to? A house, for a start. Okay, so how many people here have? Most people here live in houses or apartments or some kind of building rather than on the street. Actually, we went for a walk. And then we came down and we passed like a little leaf humpy in the middle of the bush. I didn't realise that there were still like indigenous people living around here, but it was great to see. So most of us live in houses. Is that easy to maintain a house? No, kind of expensive, right? And then you have to work really, really hard for many, many hours to be able to afford it. And then you've paid all of that money for it. And what happens? The plumbing bloody breaks. And all of those things happen. It's a constant hassle. Why? Because you're having to hold on to it and it's hard. Yeah? And then you have to do your job. Yeah? I'm sure many people here have jobs to do. How many people has a nice, easy job? No? Jobs are hard, right? You have to put work into it. You have a nice, easy job? Excellent. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. That's so wonderful. But now you've got a nice, easy job, you still have to hold on to it, right? Right? And so all of this work we have to do to hold on to things, constantly working hard all the time. And you want to do meditation, literally you just have to sit down and do nothing. That's it. What could be easier? Literally nothing to it. Yeah? But there is a little, it's not quite as simple as that. Because we have a slight space problem. And just as space has lots of junk in it, right? When we sit down and we sit down to meditate, also the space inside us has a lot of junk in it. Typically. Right? Okay, that's fine. So how do we undertake our meditation then? How do we actually go about it? In a minute we're going to be doing some mindfulness or breathing meditation. Right? Now, has anybody here done mindfulness of breathing? Yes? You've done mindfulness of breathing. Excellent. And when you're doing mindfulness of breathing, tell me if this is how it works or not. And first of all, you have to concentrate on your breath. Is that right?
No.
No spoilers from the... No spoilers, okay? All right. Do we have to concentrate on the breath? No? You don't have to concentrate on the breath. Okay, well, what do you do then?
You watch.
You watch. Isn't that the same as concentrating? Because
you're just watching what's happening.
But you're watching what's happening, or you're watching the breath?
You're watching what's happening to the breath.
You're watching what's happening to the breath. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Oh, but that's good. If people have that kind of understanding, that's good. I think probably many people here maybe heard Ajahn Brahm's teachings and so on, where he talks about this kind of thing quite a lot. So sometimes when we sit to meditate, we want to concentrate on the breath. So how many people, when they're sitting down and meditating, how many people have distracting thoughts? Yes? Excellent. Okay? I want you to know that to sit and meditate and to have these distracting thoughts is incredible. And I want you to appreciate that this is an astonishing achievement. And I know that when you sit down to meditate, you probably think, oh, I wish I didn't have these as distracting thoughts. Who would wish that they didn't have distracting thoughts, right? Okay, fine. I just want to check we're on the same page. But think about it. You know who doesn't have distracting thoughts? A brick. Right? Like seriously, you ask any brick if they have distracting thoughts, and I guarantee you, they'll say, no, I never have distracting thoughts, yeah? Right? Who else doesn't have distracting thoughts? Earthworms, I'm guessing. My point here, well, I'm being a bit silly, but my point here is very simple, that thoughts are actually an achievement. That's something that we learn how to do, and it's a capability that we have. And the fact that when we're meditating and we think that thoughts are a problem is a matter of perspective, because thoughts are actually a skill that we have learned that are actually highly sophisticated and are capable of incredible things. So we shouldn't think that thoughts themselves are a problem. Thoughts themselves are an achievement of the human mind, a skill of the human mind. So when we meditate, thoughts come into our, we're sitting there to meditate, and then you think, oh, my mind is filled with so many distracting thoughts. And then we think, oh, that's a problem. But you know what? The fact you have just become aware of how your mind works. This is lesson number 1 in how your mind works. And every time that you sit there, you become aware, oh, that's how it works. My mind keeps on coming up with all of these thoughts. And you think that this is a problem. This is wisdom. You're actually learning how your mind works. And so a lot of people, when they come to meditate, start to look at meditation the wrong way. It's as if we would start to learn how to jog, for example. And when you learn how to jog, you run down the street and somebody says, how was your jogging? And you say, it was terrible. I was tired at the end of it. And sweating. What's that all about? You know, I saw this world champion athlete and he ran twice as far and didn't get tired and sweating. What's wrong with me? That's what your mind is like. We shouldn't see distracting thoughts or all of these things as being a problem. That's just how your mind is. And the fact that you know that when you meditate is a sign that your consciousness is expanding. You know? How many people, when they meditate, get itchy sometimes, have an itch? Yeah? Very annoying, isn't it? Oh my goodness. How many people get really annoyed? It's even now when I mention it, I can see a couple of people scratching. I feel like an itch as soon as you mention it. I'm like, I've talked about this in meditation talks a bunch of times, and whenever I mention it, I always like feel an itch somewhere. Right? It's weird, right? When you sit down to when you're going about your life, you never notice that. But when you sit down to meditate, oh, you've got this itch. It's this tiny, tiny, tiny thing. I mean, come on, you just had a bunch of psychopaths and Nazis take over the White House. Haven't we got better things to worry about than an itch? But no. Climate change, couldn't care less. I'll live my life happily with the knowledge that we're destroying the entire fabric of life on the earth. That's fine. But this itch, oh my God, I can't let it go. Oh no, I have to scratch it. Right? Our consciousness is expanding. Something very small is becoming very clear and very apparent to us. Yeah? And when that happens, we find that our mind is shifting. The way that our mind is working is starting to shift. And even when you're starting to notice these very, very trivial things, which you think of as an annoyance or an obstacle to meditation, in fact, they are signs that your mind is becoming clear because you are knowing better. That's the purpose of meditation. Chitta bhavana, the growing of the mind, the expanding of the mind, the enhancing of the mind. So even in just sitting there and feeling a bit itchy, it's already a sign that your mind is starting to be enhanced. But wait, there's more. Letting go is only just starting. You know, when we meditate, we talk about watching the breath. I won't go into this too much, but it's kind of an interesting detail that the way we talk about meditation today is almost completely different to the way that the Buddha talked about it. I'm talking about the grammar of meditation. You see, when you talk about watching the breath, it's a thing, right? It's like saying, I'm going to watch the news. There's like a thing and I'm going to watch it. But the breath isn't a thing. The breath isn't outside of you. Your breath is part of you. Your breath is what you are doing. And if your breath is what you're doing, then your meditation is how you are doing it. Which means meditation is an adverb. So sato vahasasati, sato pasasati. Is how the Buddha talked about meditation. So sato vahasasati, sato pasasati. Mindful, one breathes in. Mindful, one breathes out. Mindful, one breathes in. Mindful, one breathes out. Just stop for a moment and think about how the Buddha is talking about this. Does he say concentrate on the breath or watch the breath or any of these things? No. You're breathing mindfully. The breath isn't an object or a thing or something you focus on or even something you watch. The breath is what you do. It's a process. It's a verb. So mindfulness is the manner in which we do that. Yeah? Think about that, right? Think about maybe you're walking down the street. You can walk down the street with your mind all over the place, or you can walk down the street mindfully. And when you walk down the street mindfully, there is a sense of presence, a sense of awareness, a sense of collectedness to what you're doing. And mindfulness of breathing is just the same. So we bring that awareness with the breath, so we breathe mindfully. Now, when we breathe mindfully, what it means is that we are, in a way, tuning into the breath. So, some of us here are musicians, and we know what it's like to tune a guitar, right? And you tune a guitar and you listen carefully. You probably do some tuner these days, right? Probably use a machine or tune it by ear.
I'm so rude, I just...
You just do it by ear, I know. I know. And you hear it, you hear that sound. And you can just kind of feel that sound, just sort of coming a little bit into tune. And then you feel, it's just there. Yeah? And when we're meditating, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're kind of tuning our way into the breath until we're sort of getting on the same wavelength as the breath. It's like we're matching our energy to the energy of the breath. But even that's maybe not an entirely accurate way of thinking about it. You know, we often don't really appreciate our breath. Like we just take it for granted. But ever since the moment that we were born, we took our first breath, then our breath has been with us. And it's been sustaining us. And it's been keeping us alive. And even now, right now, we're sitting here and we are only alive because our breath is keeping us alive. And when we get angry, our breath soothes us down. And when we need energy, our breath gives us oxygen. And when we meditate, our breath calms us down. And so our breath has this natural function to calm down our body, calm down our nerves, calm down our physiology. So when we're doing mindfulness of breathing, or perhaps better, when we are mindfully breathing, then it's not our job to make ourselves calm. This is really the deep secret of meditation. It's not our job to make ourselves calm, because calmness is in the state of nature. It's natural for things to end. It's natural for thoughts to end. It's natural for your mind to be at peace. And your breath helps nature to still your mind and to still your body. So rather than thinking of it as my job to watch my breath and make myself be peaceful, then think of it as your breath's job to calm you down. Your job is just to kind of stay out of the way. Let the breath do its job. All we do is bring that subtle, almost invisible quality of mindfulness to the breath. Letting it calm us down. One of the key qualities that mindfulness has is the quality of continuity. Mindfulness is that which does not forget. You know that thing when you start to meditate and you think, I'm going to watch my breath, and you watch your breath, and then 1, 2 breaths, and then you're away. Yeah? That's when your mindfulness has failed. Mindfulness remembers that this is what you are doing. And when you have that continuity of awareness in presence with the breath, then the breath then the breath is free to do what it wants to do, which is to take all your troubles away, to soothe all your anxieties, to relieve you of all of your burdens, and to let your mind be at peace. There is nothing you have to do about that, nothing to perfect, nothing to get right or wrong. Just let the breath take all your troubles away. Why isn't our meditation easy? Why doesn't that happen? Because we don't have faith. We don't really believe that that's what's going to happen. We've been conditioned all our lives to think we have to do things, to think we have to get things. We have to fill out all the forms. We have to complete all the targets. We have to make everything happen. And we come into meditation and we bring that same worldly mindset and we try to make it happen. We try to fulfill the things. We try to get the best teacher, the best app, the best method. Meditation's so hard. Meditation is the easiest thing in the world because peace is everywhere. Peace is all around us all the time. We are full of it. And if we let that peace come to us and let it calm us down, then we will know what that peace is like. Desang Wu Basamo Sukho. The stilling of all of those activities is bliss. So let's do some guided breath meditation and just let everything calm down. I'll give just a little bit of guidance. So we're sitting quietly and we sit comfortably and yet alert. Place the hands in the lap, one right hand on top of the left hand and your thumbs just touching. With your back straight, shoulders relaxed, and your head tilted just a little bit forward. Feel the gentle feeling of the breath as it comes in and the breath as it goes out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. When your mind wanders off, just be aware of it. Ah, okay. My mind's wandering off. Just be aware of that. Aware of where it is your mind has wandered to, what it's thinking about. And then bring your mind back into your body and let your breath calm you down. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. And as you continue breathing mindfully, notice how your breath is becoming more still, more soft, more subtle. Notice how your breath is becoming very, very soft. Very, very subtle. And you keep being mindful. Keep the awareness so even, so careful. And your breath becomes this gentle, bright, soothing energy that spreads through all your limbs until each part of your body feels tranquil, and only the barest movement of the breath in and out remains. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. And then notice that when your breath is so very subtle and your body is calm and your mind is calm, that the breath almost disappears completely. so subtle that there's just this very, very tiny movement that you can hardly feel. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Okay, so now we're going to come out of the meditation. I want you to bring your awareness back into the sounds around you, into the sensations of the cloth on your skin, until you can feel just the normal world of your senses. Now, before we finish the meditation, take a minute to reflect back over the practice we've just done together, inquiring into cause and effect. What just happened? How did my mind change? How did I use my mind? What does my mind feel like now compared to how it was at the start of the meditation? So if you reflect like this for a minute or two at the end of every meditation, then gradually, you will learn to understand how your meditation works, which means you're understanding how your mind works. And finally, we can dedicate the merit of our practice. May all beings be happy, may all beings be well, may all beings realize Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel much better after doing a nice little meditation just now. And it's amazing, really, how powerful it can be to just do a few minutes of meditation. And amazing. Something I just reflect on again and again. It just always strikes me how amazing it is that we have these teachings from the Buddha that have come down to us for 2,500 years, and are still so perfect and powerful and meaningful. It's astonishing. Like 2,500 years, and we can still look at the Buddha's teachings. I study the Buddha's teachings and suttas almost every day and find something new and something interesting and something meaningful in what they're saying. And so many times that I've looked at something and it didn't really mean anything, or I didn't think it was that important, and then it took me years to realize how significant it is. I remember when I was first starting out and reading some suttas, reading some of the Buddha's words, I did some meditation. And of course, one of the first suttas many people will read is the Mangala Sutta. And the 38 blessings. It begins, Sevana cha balanang panditanang cha sevana. Not to associate with fools, but to associate only with the wise. Not to associate with fools, but to associate only with the wise. So, quick question, is anyone here a fool?
Yes.
Is anyone here wise? Come on, I don't believe you. I think there's probably a fair amount of wisdom going round in this room. And Chi, you're not a fool.
Not all the time, maybe.
Not as far as I've seen any of the time. I've seen a lot of wisdom, but anyway. Asevana cha balanang panditanang cha sevana. So you'll be, okay, so first of all, just a linguistic detail, okay, with this. So the contrast here is between the bala, right, the fool, and the pandita. Okay, the pandita, the wise person, the astute person. The pandita often means like a scholar or a learned person. Okay, now I'm just mentioning this detail because Pali is does everyone know what Pali is? And, Pali is the language that the Buddha taught in, and the language that the Theravada scriptures are passed down in. So when we were chanting earlier, we were chanting in Pali. And so the Pali has many, many words for a wise person. English has very few. I don't know what that tells us. But in English you have problem is in English you have a sage, right? So sage is a good one. We can use for muni or something like that. You have a wise person or a wise man or something like that, and that's about it. Most of the other words are too kind of specific. You can't really use them very well. Like something like you could say somebody is a wizard, right? It's a very good word, but it doesn't feel that appropriate in the context of Buddhism, right? Or you could say someone's a genius. Again, it's not quite right, is it? Yeah, somebody is very smart. It's not really quite right, is it? Most of the words that we have to be smart or intelligent or something don't quite capture that essence of really wisdom in English, in Pali. Anyway, I'm just sharing with you the dukkha of the translator, so don't worry about that. But in So the word pandita means somebody who's wise or astute or intelligent, but it's not quite as elevated as some of the other words, okay? So something like a word like muni, for example, always uses to mean like a sage, somebody who has like really transcendent wisdom. Whereas pandita more means somebody who's sensible, somebody who's reasonably smart, knows what they're talking about. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have like super duper transcendent Buddha wisdom. It just means you have to be reasonably smart. So you can kind of lower your expectations of what to associate with the wise means in this context. But also, like these are the first lines in the Mangala Sutta. So when we're reading the suttas, the sequence of things always matters, right? So the sequence at the beginning is referring to very simple things, right? Later on it goes through, it gets more and more profound, and by the end it's talking about very profound matters. But at the beginning it's only something very simple. So the pandita doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's, an arahant or someone who's enlightened. Obviously, if you can hang around with arahants, that's best, okay? That's great, but still we try to hang around with whoever it is that has wisdom. And we try to avoid fools. Now, when I first heard this teaching, I didn't like it. Not to associate with fools, I thought that was very judgmental. Who am I to say who is a fool, right? I mean, I'm sure there are other people who would say I'm a fool. Yeah? I mean, I can't imagine that they would, but but I guess, hypothetically speaking. But all of us are fools sometimes. And how do we know who's a fool? And anyway, there are plenty of people who are foolish, but who are actually also wise. I don't know if you know anyone like that, but there are plenty of people. I mean, even just like, very, very simple people like you might meet, and they don't know a lot about Buddhism or anything like that, but they have a gentleness and a wisdom to them. They understand things. And so who's to say who's a fool and who's wise? So that's how I felt when I first heard that teaching. And I thought, oh, well, I didn't really like that teaching. And, everything else was pretty good. So I'll take that. That's good. And I sort of filed that one away for a while. I just go, no, not such an inspiring verse. I didn't think there was anything bad or wrong with it, but just not so inspiring. And I just filed it away for a little while. And then I encountered this little thing you might have heard of. It's called the internet. And I realized, oh yeah, that's like really important. Not to associate with fools. Oh yeah. Now I know what that was talking about. The Buddha had to wait until the internet was invented before we could really know what a fool was. Until then, people were struggling to be fools, like working on fulfilling that archetype. But then the internet was invented, and we could manifest foolishness in like ways hitherto unimaginable. I mean, I'm kind of kidding around, but also kind of not. And over time, as I got older, perhaps I got wise. Perhaps I simply got grumpy. I don't know. But I more and more began to realize actually the wisdom of this saying and how important it is. And you begin to realize that when that the people who we associate with and the people who we choose to have around us affect us in profound ways. And I noticed a kind of a curious thing, that when we think about people who are fools, then it's not a matter of intelligence. There are plenty of very smart people who are, very bad people. So the fools and the wise it's not the same as having a high IQ or having a low IQ. It's not the same as being educated and uneducated. Foolishness and wisdom in Buddhism is a moral quality. It has to do with understanding what's right and what's wrong, knowing what's good and what's bad, And when we put high intelligence in the hands of people who don't know what's right and what's wrong, then we've got a recipe for disaster. So when we associate, to not associate with fools means to not associate with people who are immoral, people who break their precepts, people who spread hate, who spread delusions, who spread lies. And our world is full of people like that today. And it seems to be getting worse. And I'm not going to go into that too much, but I don't know about you, but the impression that I get is that these things seem to be getting worse. Maybe it's because we've all got long COVID and our brains don't work like they used to. I think there's something to that. Maybe the internet is destroying our minds. And I think that there's obviously a lot of bad faith actors who are doing this quite deliberately. It's not as if it's just an accident. I think AI is destroying our minds. Personally, I loathe and detest AI with every fibre of my being. And I would take all of those AI servers and dump them at the bottom of the ocean, except somebody told me, but then they would poison the fish, and I'd be like, yeah, poor old fish, they deserve that. We'll dump them into a volcano instead. That would be the best thing we could do with all those AI servers. And all the crypto ones while we're at it. So it seems to me that we are making a frontal assault on our critical capacity. And one of the things that I've kind of noticed with this is that people who are fools, people who want to disrupt a civil conversation, or people who want to disrupt wisdom, or people who want to inject hate or inject bigotry, or who want to drag us down to our worst instincts, people like that always think that we somehow have a responsibility, we have an obligation to listen to them, as if not listening to them is some great affront to them. And we have this idea today that people talk about free speech. It's interesting that in Buddhism we don't really have a concept of freedom of speech. Perhaps it wasn't necessary at the Buddha's times. It's a bit hard to say. Actually, in the Buddha's day, there were many different philosophies, many different religions and spiritualities, some of which were really outrageous. There was one major religious teacher who was at Pakudakachina, I think. Anyway, one of the 6 ascetics who was contemporary with the Buddha, and he said that there's no such thing as good and bad. No such thing as punya and papa, no such thing as merit and demerit. If you go down the north side of the Ganges, offering and being generous and helping everybody, you're not making any merit by that. And if you go down the south side of the Ganges, killing and slaughtering and reducing all living beings to just a mass of flesh, you're not doing any bad by that. Yeah? And so the person who was teaching this was still regarded as a respected ascetic. Even the kings went to see him. King Jatasattu went to visit him and paid respects and so on. I don't know, I can't imagine somebody teaching that and getting away with it today. At the very least, your tax deductible status would be questionable. So it seems people were fairly open to be able to teach things, even that were quite outrageous by modern standards. But the Buddha didn't really talk about freedom to free speech. The Buddha talked rather about right speech. And I feel that this is something we've kind of forgotten the art of. Right speech has a number of specific qualities that the Buddha talked about. And right speech is not just something that is or is not, but right speech is something that we can aspire to, something we can train ourselves to. I'm training myself to do it right now. And as I speak to you, I'm trying to bear in mind the qualities of right speech. And so I'm trying to speak to you in a way that, first of all, is true. Yeah? So this is one essential quality of right speech. So the Buddha did not tolerate lies of any form. And he did not believe that we could tell white lies. No such thing as a white lie in Buddhism. Yeah. We can sometimes use speech in a way that's maybe indirect, right? But without lying. Yeah? Most people slip into telling white lies very easily, whereas in fact you can often rephrase it or redirect it so that you don't have to tell a lie. I'll give you one example of when that happened. Soon after the Buddha was enlightened, he was meditating in the forest, and there was a young man called Yasa. And Yasa had had essentially an existential crisis and wandered out of his home looking distraught and looking for something he didn't know what. Luckily he came upon the Buddha, and the Buddha taught him, and he realized, I think, stream entry became the first stage of enlightenment, something like that. And then while they were sitting there talking, Yasa's father comes along, and Yasa's father was going to grab Yasa and drag him back home. So Yasa wanted to hide. So the Buddha used his psychic powers to hide Yasa so nobody could see him. Yasa's father comes along, says to the Buddha, "Have you seen my son, Yasa?" What does the Buddha say? He doesn't want Yasa to be dragged back home. So he says to Yasa's father, "Well, perhaps if you sit here for a while, maybe you'll see him." Right? It's not a lie. Maybe he will. Yeah? So he sits for a while. The Buddha teaches him Dhamma, and then when he was converted to Dhamma, he said, okay. So then he let his father see Yasa again. Yeah? So this is right speech. So this is a way of using speech where you don't necessarily have, sometimes it's true, sometimes the truth is painful, sometimes, it's hurtful, and so you have to use your judgment. But that doesn't mean that you should lie. It means that you should reflect on a way of speaking that you can use that's going to be beneficial for that person without breaking that precept on lying. Now, one of the reasons why that precept on lying is so fundamental to Buddhism is because the root of all suffering is delusion. The root of all suffering is delusion. And when you lie, you actively choose to create delusion in that other person. Delusion is not just the absence of knowledge. Delusion is a force that twists the mind to hide the nature of reality. So when you tell a lie, you are twisting somebody's mind to hide the truth from them. No? Once when I spoke to a man who was really distraught and really upset, he'd committed adultery. And he was really upset. He met this girl who he knew from school. He was like in his 40s or something by now. Met this girl he had a fling with when they were in high school. He was on a business trip, couldn't help himself. Slept with this girl and came to see me. He was like in tears. What do I do? I can't tell my wife. If I tell my wife, she'll be so upset. But I love her. I'm going to stay with her. I'm not going to do that again. I said to him, if you don't tell your wife, you're taking away her right to be upset. She should be upset. You've done something bad. And if she's going to be upset, that's up to her. And if she chooses to leave you, that's up to her. That's her choice to make, not yours, because you're the one who's done something wrong. And so you don't fix that wrong thing you've done by lying and saying another wrong thing. So we live in a world today where right now, as we're sitting here, there are more lies than ever before. We have industrialized the creation of lies at a scale that is just incomprehensible. And the machinery of lies is moving at a pace that nobody, I think, can really comprehend. Lies told by political leaders. Donald Trump is the most documented liar in history. Tens of thousands of lies documented. That was in his last time. That was in his first term. He hasn't stopped. Every time he opens his mouth, he's lying. And yet he gets appointed to be president again. AI is full of lies. I'm not talking about the supposed hallucinations of AI. Everything that AI says is a lie because it presents itself as knowledge, and it isn't. It is just a stream of meaningless data that your mind interprets as having meaning. AI doesn't have hallucinations. You hallucinate when you think that AI is saying something meaningful. Every single thing that AI comes out with is inherently meaningless, and it always will be. And the better that AI gets, the worse it is, because it convinces you more completely that it is saying something meaningful. So we are having industrialized this capacity for lying at an astonishing scale. And what that means is that the truth is more precious than ever. Those tiny pearls of truth are the most incredibly valuable things in the world today. And this is something for each one of us to bear in mind. Every person in this room cares about the truth. Every single person in this room understands the value of truth, and it is up to you to speak that truth. This is crucially important. We stand at an abyss in history. I hopefully don't need to remind you what happened the last time that a group of Nazis took control of a major Western power. That's what's happened today. Don't underestimate it. If we can stick by the truth, this is the most powerful weapon that we have. Every word that you say that is true is going to be a bar or a nail or something that is going to be keeping the world, the fabric of our world, in place. But right speech is not just truth. Right speech is also speech that is pleasing. So the Buddha wanted us to speak in a way that is, what's the phrase that we use, that is going to the heart, pleasing to the ears. And this is another area in which our capacity for speech has been so eroded in modern times. We see people cursing each other. We see people using aggressive speech. And again, the internet, we see kind of a torrent of hateful speech, of attacks, of lies, abusive speech, threats of death threats, rape threats, threats to hurt and harm. And these things are so hurtful and so painful, so hard to endure. Sometimes they drive people to suicide. Sometimes people have had to leave their homes and go to another country because of these things. They're incredibly painful. And I really encourage you to make sure to do what you can to stand up against this kind of thing. No matter what others are saying, to check yourself and to speak with civility and to speak with politeness. And that doesn't mean tolerating all of that hateful speech. It means stopping it, so that there is a space for civility and for kindness in the way that we use speech. Speech also should be harmonious. It should be reconciling those who are divided. This is also very important, but you have to remember that not every division can be reconciled. The Buddha did not try to solve every problem. Sometimes, even in the Sangha, he could not solve the problem. There's a famous episode at Kosambi where monks were arguing about, well, it's a bit embarrassing to say, but monks were arguing about leaving the water in the water dipper in the toilet. Is it okay to leave water in the water dipper in the toilet, or is it not? It's a subtle point of vinaya. So they argued with each other back and forth so bad. And that the whole Sangha, they were in one monastery, or the whole Sangha generally, but the whole Sangha in that place, in Kosambi, was divided. Everyone took sides. And everyone was yelling at each other. And the Buddha came and said, enough! Stop it! No more arguing, no more quarrelling. And they said to the Buddha, don't you worry about it, Lord Buddha. We'll be responsible for our quarrelling. You can just go and do some nice meditation. And they kept arguing. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? The Buddha says don't quarrel, and you keep quarrelling, and it's just about leaving water in a water dipper. Of all the stories in the Pali Vinaya, this is the most realistic. This is exactly what monastic life is like, okay? That's exactly what happens. Eventually, the Buddha gave up. No? When I read that passage about the Buddha giving up, it fills me with so much joy and inspiration. I feel so much better about all the times I've given up. Oh my goodness, the Buddha gave up. Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, he tried. Okay, it didn't work. Yeah, when many voices shout at once, no one thinks they're a fool. And he walked off into the forest. Yeah. That's really dramatic. I've really wanted to do that on a number of occasions. Like, it's something I really wanted to do was just like get my bag and my bowl and just walk out of the monastery and just walk down the road. This is so cool, but I never had the guts to do it. So. Maybe one day. And the Buddha just walks off and just stays. I'll just go and stay in the forest, you know. So he knew that there are some things that you can solve and some things you can't solve. Sometimes it's just a matter of time. He didn't give up on them, but they have to solve their own problem. Eventually they realized that they were being foolish. They came to see the Buddha. They figured Buddha forgave them and they resolved those difficulties. Not that you can't resolve it, but you can't necessarily resolve it now. And the world is full of problems that actually can't be resolved. Maybe they'll be resolved one time, but we can't really say. So we try to resolve those things that can be resolved, but don't waste your life trying to resolve the unresolvable. You just become exhausted and depressed. Solve those things that can be solved. And finally, the right speech is also supposed to be meaningful. Now, meaningful at a kind of a basic level means very simply that you say something that is that has a purpose. You know, you might say, "Well, I want a cup of tea." It's a meaningful statement. Okay, you want a cup of tea? Get a cup of tea. But of course, really, what the Buddha's talking about is talking in a way that is leading to the goal, leading to nibbana. One of the characteristics of meaningful speech is that it is clear and it makes sense. So when we're talking, this also is a part of right speech. We should challenge ourselves to be able to talk in a way that is articulate and that is clear and that brings meaning into the minds of the people who are listening to us. This is a really kind of important thing that I think is not always noticed. I notice it because I'm giving Dhamma talks all the time. And I'm always worried that nobody's going to understand me. And so I've tried over the years to learn how to make my thoughts comprehensible to people, to be able to articulate myself, and to know to know how to use sentences that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, that make a point. Yeah? So this is also something to bear in mind. When you're talking to somebody and you're rambling around the point and you're not really saying what you want to say, the other person is trying to understand you. And they are spending their cognitive energy to try to figure out what it is that you're saying. And it gets weary. Yeah? It's wearying. So it's something for us to remember that when we're talking, to try to express ourselves in a way that is meaningful and clear for the other person. I remember recently we just done some meditation retreats, and there was one gentleman on our meditation retreat who was really unable to do this. I couldn't really help him, but he would come in for the meditation interview and just ramble for like 15 minutes and then just go away. I had no idea what he was trying to say, and I couldn't say anything to him because I had no idea like what the point of anything was. I felt really sorry for him. Like, how can he communicate like that? I couldn't really help him. I didn't have enough time. Maybe if I'd had longer, I could have helped him. Anyway, so to speak in a way that's meaningful. And just as the world is being filled with lies, it's being filled with hateful speech that's designed to tear people apart, the world is also being filled with meaningless crap. And just the most ridiculous, banal rubbish is flooding social media, flooding all of our thought space. And once again, this is entirely deliberate. It's not like this is an accident. This is entirely deliberate. For example, just to give you one example, when a few years ago, when COVID was ending, they were having the street riots in Beijing and Shanghai. I don't know if you remember about those. Yeah? A remarkable thing, right? The people of China getting out on the streets. They have an authoritarian government, but still they dared to get out on the streets and make these massive protests. If you went on Twitter at that time and searched for Beijing, what would you find? Dozens and dozens and dozens of pretty girls from Beijing who wanted to have a meeting with you. They just happened to be available and happened to be there. And thinking, oh yeah, why don't we hook up? And after scrolling down maybe 100 of these, you'd get to one tweet about the riots and the protests. Yeah? Not an accident. Yeah? Not an accident. That's how they do it. Flood the zone with meaningless garbage so that anything meaningful just gets lost. I'm begging you, hang on to meaning. Please, hang on to meaning. A simple, small word of truth and meaning is worth more than all of the rubbish and all of the garbage. We don't have to spend our day doom scrolling, or, as they say today, just scrolling. We don't have to consume every bit of media. We don't have to know everything. Just a small amount is enough. Yeah? The teachings of the Buddha have such a strong essence and a strong meaning that if we learn a little bit and hang on to a little bit by reading, for example, a sutta per day, then we are filling our mind with meaning. And when we're reading suttas, don't just pay attention to what the Buddha says, but pay attention to how the Buddha says it, how he expresses himself, how he engages with people. Now, almost always when the Buddha is talking to somebody, the first thing that he does is to establish common ground with that person. Yeah? Very interesting. It's a very persistent pattern that the Buddha uses. Establish common ground and then go from there. Sometimes he'll agree, sometimes he'll disagree, but he can always find something in common. Yeah? Somebody came to the Buddha once and asked him, how do you train your monks? And the Buddha said, well, what job do you have? He says, I'm an accountant. Ganaka Moggallana Sutta. Amazing. A whole sutta about an accountant. Any accountants here? Awesome, right? Right? So there's a whole sutta about you. And then the Buddha says, how do you train, and the Buddha says, how do you train somebody to be an accountant? I mean, just think about that, right? Like most people would say, like accountancy and Buddhism have nothing to do with each other. But the Buddha is so empathetic that the first thing he does is say, well, how do you teach people? Huh? And then when he says, well, we teach them gradually, we start with simple psalms and we work out to more complicated ones, and the Buddha said, yeah, that's what we do too. Yeah? We start with simple things and then we move to more profound things. So this, by reading the suttas, and by reading and paying attention to how the Buddha taught, then we can train our own speech to be more truthful, to be more agreeable, to be more harmonious, and to be more meaningful. That way we can stand against this flood of meaningless which is sweeping the world. The title for this talk is The Eye of the Storm. And the Buddha said that we should be among those who are in conflict, then we should be at peace. And for those who are being violent, we should be harmless. And among those who are greedy, we should be content. And as a monk and as a student of the Buddha's teachings, it's almost shocking to me to see how the wisdom of the Buddha is so there, it's so present, and yet just so ignored. Yesterday we had the good fortune to speak with Professor Richard Gombrich, who some of you may know as one of the great doyens of Pali and Buddhist studies, a former chair of Sanskrit at Oxford for many years. He was actually the Sanskrit, the chair is in Sanskrit, but yeah, he taught in Sanskrit and Pali, but the name of the chair is in Sanskrit. Anyway, and one of the things that he said was that he'd been paying attention and following the news on the conflict in Gaza and the terrible atrocities that have been committed there. And he was lamenting the absence of a Buddhist perspective on that. He said the Buddhist perspective would be that violence begets violence, and that when you're attacked, it does not mean that you have to attack back, and that violence can only be overcome with love. And he said that in all of the media that he'd seen and all of the articles that he'd read, nobody was saying that. Not a single person was saying that. And it wasn't so much that he was talking about the fact that Buddhists weren't being heard. Like, whether Buddhists are being heard is another thing. But it's the teachings of the Buddha, the message of the Buddha was not there. Whether it's called Buddhism or not doesn't really matter. It's such a shame, isn't it? There's so many things that the Buddha's teaching can give us, and so many things that if we were to follow them would solve all the world's problems very quickly. Yet we just don't. Strange, isn't it? Strange how the world goes. You know why? Why we do that? Delusion. Because delusion hides the truth. It makes us think that if there's violence, we can respond with more violence and somehow that will make a solution. Delusion makes us think that if we build another factory, somehow we'll satisfy people's desires. Delusion makes us think that if we... all of these things, this is just delusion. And I don't know about you, but for myself, I've often felt really challenged these last few months. I've been in Europe now for just over 3 months, 3.5 months. And seemingly it's been one thing after another. I was traveling through Europe and it's like there was 1 week where it was like the German government went, and then the French government went, and then the Syrian government went, and the Korean government went, and the Romanian government nearly went, and the Georgian government nearly went. I'm like, I'm sorry, who's left? And it's like this sense of vertigo, like what is left? Like all of the things that we thought were reliable, you know? Like we thought we would be able to whinge and complain about our politicians. And then they're not there anymore. What do we complain about now? Now we've got something to really complain about. So we are entering times that are unprecedented, and we will every day be faced with challenges, and it's not going away, and it's not going to just solve itself. So I don't have any solutions for you, and I don't have any solace for you, really. But I do believe that if we pay attention to the Buddha's teachings, and if we stick with the truth at the very minimum, then we at least we are doing our bit to slow things down or to hold things together. And certainly we're doing our bit to practice our own Eightfold Path. At the end of the day, the world is as it is. The Buddha in the Attadanda Sutta spoke about how he left home and was propelled by the fact that all of the directions were being tossed about, that he felt stranded like a fish in a dried up stream, and that he was shocked by the fact that people were always searching for somewhere to settle down, yet even when they settled down, they still fought with each other. And so he looked for an escape, and he found it. And he taught us what that escape is. So there is an escape from all of these things, I don't have any doubt. But the suffering is still real. So if we are going to make it through, and if we're going to thrive in this time, then we have that responsibility to practice the Eightfold Path for ourselves and also for those around us. And much as we might be lost, much as we might be distressed, but at least we have that. We always have the Dhamma. And that gives us something where we can be a still point, and we can become a refuge for those around us. So that's just a few thoughts for you this evening, and I offer that for your reflection. And I'd like to invite if there's any comments or questions, or if anyone has any good jokes to share with us. Vednan.
Venerable, do you mind a difficult question? It might become relevant in the future. You know the classic ethical dilemma of Nazis at the door, where are the Jews in the house?
Right.
How would we deal with that situation? I mean, is Buddhism absolutist on not lying, or do you sometimes have to take a karmic hit, maybe?
Okay, so the question, I'll just repeat the question to make sure that the recording gets it. No, I'll repeat, sorry, I'll just repeat it because the mics are pointed this way, that's all. The question was about the classic problem about the Nazis are at the door. They ask, where are the Jews in the house? What do you do? Do you say there are Jews in the house? Yes. Do you say there are Jews in the house? No. And is Buddhist absolutist about questions of truth? Well, Buddhism is not absolutist about anything. Buddhism is relativist about everything. So in the analysis of the teachings of karma, there are 4 kinds of karma. There's black karma with black result. There's white karma with white result. And there's black and white karma with black and white result, as well as neither black nor white karma with neither black nor white result. Yeah? So the Buddha wanted to cover all the bases. Yeah? And this is actually a really important moral teaching. So in Western philosophy, the tendency is called the law of the excluded middle. Basically, it's like it has to be either A or B, right? And so Buddhism acknowledges what they call the tetralemma, A, B, A plus B, or neither A nor B, which gives you a much more nuanced take on things. So sometimes you're put into situations where you might make that choice to do something that is both good and bad. So in that case, telling a lie is bad, but then saving a life is good. Now, in that particular case, I think most people would agree that the telling a lie to some Nazis, if it's bad, it's not all that bad. Whereas saving the life of persecuted people is like really good. So that's probably black and white karma with like a lot of white, tiny bit of black, okay? But of course, there are other cases where it's much more difficult to make that decision. Even in that case, then you should still try to use your speech in a way that wasn't going to be telling an outright lie, if you could. But obviously, in that case, if you have to tell a lie, then it's probably the reasonable thing to do. But in those kinds of cases where there is both black and white karma leading to black and white result, it's not quite correct really to talk about should. Like we like to think that there's a right or a wrong thing to do in every circumstance, but in fact there's many cases where it's really difficult to say which is right or which is wrong. And so in cases like that, I think it's important to have some compassion for the person who has to make those decisions, because they're not easy decisions. So to give a person some compassion and to understand that they're making a difficult decision in a difficult context. The same. I did retreats in Poland, and there are a number of Ukrainian refugees there, and this question obviously came up in that case as well. I'm afraid we're all going to be facing those kinds of decisions much more in future. But go on. Sorry, yes.
Hello. So you said earlier that when we try and make a good speech, to make it sweet and to make it meaningful.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how should you respond if the person, even if you do make it as sweet as possible, tends to take it as an insult or hurt? Is that
Sorry, if I'm not quite sure what the situation. Can you give me an example?
If you try and make something that you want to tell somebody quite sweet, it still comes across to them as hurt. Is that?
Well, there are limits, right?
Repeat the question.
Sorry, I'll repeat the question. Yeah. So if you maybe you're trying to be nice to somebody, and trying to speak sweetly, but they still get upset and they still take it the wrong way. Yeah. Well, look, you just try to do your best. If it's not your intention, then that's not really anything that you own. People can misunderstand things all the time, and these days I hear that it's passive aggressive to put full stops at the end of your sentences and text messages. Is that right? So, look, I was born in 1966. Okay. I'm going to put full stops at the end of my sentences, and if somebody doesn't like it, I'm sorry. So there has to be a bit of give and take there, right? But if somebody, it's understandable. But if somebody really feels like that, then there's a responsibility for communication on both sides. Yeah. But look, it's another quality of this kind of speech that's proliferated on the internet and so on. Because first of all, we have context collapse, right? So you strip out emotion, you strip out body language, you strip out your history and the context and everything like that. For example, like we're here in a temple, and we're speaking. I've never met you before, but we're speaking in a respectful way with each other. And because we can see that, there's an environment that makes it meaningful. We have our sort of central, we have a forum. And in the rules of the forum, it says, well, you should speak on here as if you're speaking in a temple. All right? This is our temple. And you're coming into our temple, respect it. But not always easy to do that or to get people to do that. So we've stripped away all of that context. And then we've got anonymity on the internet, and then we've got a kind of a high-powered environment that prioritizes zingers and engagement and stuff, and so the capacity to really listen kindly and to exchange kindly is really sapped. So, like, one of the things that I would say with that is just to make a point to consciously use your speech, especially on the internet, in ways that are kind and helpful and supportive. Even if you feel like you're not really adding anything, at least you can be kind and add some support. And just try. I'm not saying that you have to just be blandly positive about anything, but I'm saying that just when people feel like they're being supported and listened to, then it's less likely to degenerate into just a singing match. Yeah. Yeah, I honestly, the older and the grumpier I get, the more I think that it's a mistake that we've shifted so much of our communication to digital media and to the internet in general. It's great for some things, to share information and so on. That's terrific. But there's something that I always notice on our forum, like we discuss suttas and so on. And so one of the signs of wisdom is that you keep conversation on the internet small. Like if you need to talk about something small, then you can talk about it successfully. But if you're like talking about, you get into these intractable, endless discussions about the nature of nibbana or the nature of jhana or the nature of dependent origination, it goes on and on. People seem to enjoy it. I don't know. Good on you, whatever. But I kind of feel that actually understanding of these things comes from contemplation, it comes from living, it comes from wisdom. It's something that grows over time. And to know what conversation is useful and what conversation is not useful is one of the dimensions of wisdom. Yeah.
So I've been studying anatta.
Have you?
And
Congratulations, by the way. How's it going? The study?
It's right, yeah, it's quite difficult to get my head around.
Okay. And you were studying it through, like, what particular books or suttas or?
Stephen Collins.
Okay.
Peter Harvey. The Anatta Sutra. So these sorts.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, so there's an idea of conventional truth and ultimate truth.
There is that idea, yes.
And when dealing with truth, how can you sort of recognise which truth you should be speaking in which situations?
Okay, so there is. So the question is, in the context of learning about anatta or not self, that there is an idea of conventional truth and ultimate truth, and how do we know in which context we should be using which kind of speech? Okay, yes, you're quite right. There is that idea, but that idea we don't really find in the suttas. So that's a kind of a later development of an idea. And personally, I don't really like it. I think it's a bit kind of cut and dried and a bit categorical. Yeah. Actually, there's many different ways of talking about things. I'd rather than thinking about conventional or ultimate truth, I'd rather think in terms of what kind of speech is going to illuminate what we want to illuminate. Right? So your kind of speech depends on your desire. Yeah? So there are certain cases where you want to illuminate things in a certain way. So again, it's in a way that like conventional and ultimate truth is really more like just ordinary and specialized vocabulary, right? So, for example, a chemist, right? A chemist might go down to their greengrocers and buy organic vegetables, right? But a chemist would also know that organic in chemistry has a specific meaning that's got nothing to do with the kind of vegetables that you're buying, because all vegetables are made of carbon compounds, and organic chemistry is the chemistry of carbon compounds. So organic vegetables is meaningless from a chemical point of view. But a chemist knows that when they're in the laboratory, that if it says we're doing a experiment with organic chemistry, that I'm not putting a zucchini in it, but I'm talking about proteins and stuff. So there are different contexts. But then those different contexts ultimately depend on what you want, right? And so then that depends on like what it is that you're trying to clarify. Yeah. I feel like you're going to go away from this and saying, I asked him about not self and he answered about a zucchini. Yes.
I was recently reading the sutta about analysis of conflict.
Vibhanga Sutta. Oh, excellent.
Vibhanga Sutta. I was just trying to apply it to my son, the way of speaking, because that talks about how you speak there as well, how to use words. So this sharp, but you know that it's beneficial for that person who's listening, but it's a bit tricky because me being a mother and him,
Right.
and then I'm just judging that this is the right time to use the sharp word and it's beneficial, probably.
Right.
And the benefit might not be immediately visible, but it might be visible in about a week or so when he has time to contemplate. It's a bit tricky area.
Tricky.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the question was about the Aranavibhanga Sutta, and that said that sometimes you can use speech that's sharp. But it's difficult as a mother to know exactly when to do that and when it's going to be beneficial. So first of all, look, can I say that mothers are awesome, and thank you so much for being a mum and for looking after your son and trying to bring him up. And he's like really lucky to have a mum who thinks about things in that way and who reflects on the way that she's using her speech and tries to apply the principles of Dhamma there. So to me, that's the main thing, and I think that you're being an awesome mum. So that's fantastic. And if, honestly, and without any exaggeration, if the world was filled with, if a few people who I'm thinking of right now had awesome mums like you, then the world would probably not be in the strife that we're having. But anyway, but yeah, you never know 100%, so you just have to try to do your best, right? It's always kind of not a bad idea to downplay it a little bit, right? So you want to kind of sharp doesn't mean but you can kind of moderate if you keep your speech within a moderate spectrum, then even just a little bit sharper will be felt, right? But if you're yelling at someone all the time, then they just filter it out. Right, so you just keep it a little bit, and then just a little bit more, and then mummy means it, and so that's the way to try to do that, and just to try to see how things go, in that method. Yeah, I'll give you an example of it's not quite sharp speech, but kind of a little bit almost on the same way. I was traveling out of Colombo a few years ago, and we were having to wait in the airport lounge. And it was full. The flight was full, and the airport lounge was full. And there was this couple near me, quite a young couple, with a young daughter. And the daughter was maybe, 6 or something like that. And she was being a bit of a scamp, and she was sort of playing around and so on. And the mother was there, trying to get the daughter. And the father was just sitting next to them. And you know how kids go. Try it a little bit more, and then eventually the toy or whatever she had flew over the head of the mother and then hit the person in the next aisle or something like that. And the mother's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and the next person was like, "Fine," and so on. And so then the dad intervenes, right? Now, Dad was a big guy, tall and built, right? And this girl was like nothing and a half, right? And Dad was like, "Come here." And I'm sitting watching this and I'm thinking, oh my God, no, he's going to hit her or something. And I was thinking, oh my God, don't do it. And the girl comes over and the dad's sitting there in the chair and she's standing in front of him and he's sitting and she's like there and she's like looking at him and oh my God, she was so ferocious. She just looked at him like this and Dad looked back at her and she looked at him and he looked back at her and then she... And then when she broke down in tears, and Dad bent forward and took her in this big hug and wrapped her in his arms and held her so tightly. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's so nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking as somebody who's older and grumpier than you,
I'm so happy to know that there are those people.
I kind of find myself less and less surprised by what's going on. I mean, on one level it's like, oh my goodness, that's so shocking, what's going on.
Yeah.
And also it reminds you of this and so on.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, when I look into my own mind,
Yeah.
you know, and I think, well, actually a lot of the time I'm on a raw footing. And it doesn't surprise me as much as it might have done because, you know, after you get to understand how the mind works, it's like, well, yeah, you know, this is the mind manifesting, isn't
Right.
it? And all I'm kind of left with is, it just seems to be, you know, it's a question of conditions. You know, under these conditions, this is what human beings do.
Right.
Under those conditions, and what on earth makes me? I mean, you know, I always ask myself, what would I do in that situation, having been conditioned in that way? Would I see things that way? Would you know, you'll never know. But I don't know what I'm wanting to ask you, but except to say that I don't know how inevitable it is. I don't know if I'm making something yet.
I think we're all struggling to make sense.
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about is like feeling that sense of connection and that sense of like, if, you know, that could be me or it could be any of us under different circumstances. And yes, we are all conditioned and that's definitely a reality. At the same time, though, we also make choices, and we have we have to take responsibility for those choices. And in even within families, then it routinely happens that you might have a family that's abusive or parents are abusive, and some of the kids grow up to be abusers and some of them do not. My father was one of those people. My father grew up with my father's father was abusive to him. He didn't quite grow up with him because his father left. I suspect that my grandmother kicked him out and told him to leave. That's what I suspect. But I think my dad was too young to know really what happened. And but he was always the most gentle and loving father, and he never passed that down again, you know.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So it's really we can't know what we would do until we were in that situation. Yeah, but one thing about that, though, what you're saying, I think it is crucial that in this that we don't lose our humanity, because one of the greatest, if not the greatest, crimes that is done is to dehumanize people, to treat them as less, to treat them as other. And we have seen that this is happening systematically. It's been going on, to treat women as less and other, to treat trans people as less and other, to treat queer people as less and other, to treat Jews as less and other, to treat Muslims as less and other, to treat Russians as less and other, to treat black people as less and other, to treat on and on it goes. And the some of us who happen to be white males managed to get into that tiny group that hasn't yet been aggressively dehumanized. But even we can imagine and feel grievance that we've been dehumanized by the other, right? Even if we haven't. Yeah. Yeah. So if we fall into that trap, then we are doing the same thing. Yeah. So our path, whatever our path must be, is a path of humanity and a path of recognizing the humanity in all of us, including those who do evil, because evil is also a part of humanity. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I just wanted to touch on something. At the beginning of meditation, I started to go inwards, and I was met with a sense of needing to cry, and I that made me start going inwards. And throughout the meditation, my eyes were open, So his work guys were closed. And I wanted to know how sort of that tension, that trouble can sort of awaken us to sort of not the imperfectness of life, of that we can't, maybe not the perfect meditation, because that wasn't perfect,
Yeah.
that wasn't ideal. And I don't know how we find peace in the unideal situations. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope something can come out of that. Thank you.
I would have loved it if you'd had a good cry in the meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you feel like crying now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like it a bit. Yeah. You know, it's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And everybody here, I just want to check with everybody. Does anybody here mind if someone has a good cry? No. I think everybody here wishes only that you be happy. And that's why we're all together. Yeah.
Thank you guys, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So when you talk about something being imperfect, to me, being imperfect or perfect doesn't really matter. It is as it is. And we are real, and it's reality. And that's all. Yeah. When I've been teaching meditation retreats and you do meditation interviews, then people always cry in meditation interviews. So I always keep a box of tissues. But I always keep a box of tissues out of sight somewhere. So when they come along and they cry, it's not just that people cry in retreats, in interviews, but the box of tissues is for them. Because they're special when they cry. Yeah, because it means something. Yeah. And it means that there's a vulnerability and that those emotions are manifesting themselves. So if they have their way, soon we'll all be replaced by robots. And they're not going to cry. So we should enjoy it while we've got it. Yeah. Okay, we should probably wrap up about now, I'm thinking. We've gone a little bit over time. And I don't want to keep people here. Thanks everybody for your attention. Thanks especially to the Sangha for inviting us and for hosting us here. And to Venerable Chanda for just everything, but for inviting me up to Anakampa for a few days and for being such a good friend. And I'll be, some of you I'll see over the weekend. We're doing a couple of events. Some of you I might see down in London. Otherwise, if you're ever in Sydney, drop by. So I'm staying at the monastery at the end of the world. That's a name that feels more and more apt with every passing day. So if you're ever in Sydney, then just look at our website and then come to one of our talks or whatever, or if you know somebody who's around the place. So, yeah, thank you. May you be happy.
Well, on behalf of the Sangha of Buddha Vihara, I would like to express our gratitude to Ajahn Sujato for his excellent talk, and we very much appreciate your talk tonight. Hopefully that you have learned a lot from him. Well, I quite like the way you give a talk, especially by using a story from the Dhamma, the story of the bhikkhu from Gosambi city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from time to time we encounter something like that, but even the Buddha himself couldn't solve the problem. So it's all right. Everything will be all right by then. So I think we're gonna pay respect to the Buddha, to say greeting. No, not say greeting, to say home. Sorry.
Yeah.
Arahant Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhaṃ Sawakato Bhagavata Namo Namasami Sopadipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho